It's funny how life can throw you curveballs when you least expect it. One minute, you're just trying to enjoy a Halloween trunk or treat event, watching your kids run around in costumes, and the next minute, your world is flipped upside down because of a tiny, seemingly innocent detail. It was supposed to be a normal night, another weekend outing with the kids, but I had no idea that this would be the night that shattered everything. I'm Jack, and my wife, Laura, and I had been married for 12 years. We had the perfect suburban life, a nice house, 2 great kids, and an old dog who could barely walk, but still tried to act tough. But, as you'll learn, nothing is ever as perfect as it seems, and sometimes the universe decides to give you a little wake-up call. Halloween seemed like the perfect distraction, a chance to focus on fun and family instead of the strange tension that had been building between Laura and me for the past few months. We were at the local park for the trunk or treat event, kids running around with candy bags, parents chatting by their car trunks, and the smell of pumpkin spice in the air. My son, Ben, was dressed as Spider-Man, and my daughter, Lucy, was an adorable little witch. The whole thing was as picture-perfect as a suburban Halloween could get. But little did I know that the real trick-or-treating would be happening when I wasn't paying attention. I've always prided myself on being observant, but in that moment, I was distracted by the chaos of the event, the kids, the neighbors, the festive decorations. It wasn't until I glanced over at Laura, who was chatting with another parent, Eric, a guy I'd known for years, that something caught my eye. I'd seen them talking before, but this was different. There was something off. It wasn't just the way they were laughing too loudly at nothing in particular. It wasn't the way her hand brushed against his arm, or the way his hand lingered a little longer than it should have. No, it was the jacket. She was wearing this thin, black leather jacket that I didn't recognize. I'd never seen it before, and I was sure she didn't own one like it. My stomach dropped as I wondered where she could have gotten it. But there was something even worse about it. She was wearing it over her costume. It was too casual for her bats and witches outfit. It didn't make sense. I tried to brush it off. It could have been a new jacket. Maybe she borrowed it from a friend. But the feeling gnawed at me. I had to know more, so I did what any self-respecting husband would do. I subtly snuck around to get a closer look, pretending to be busy with the kids. But as I got closer, I overheard something I never expected. Eric asked, "So, are you still planning to tell him?" My mind froze, and my heart skipped a beat. Tell him? What the hell was that about? I didn't want to hear more, but I couldn't help myself. I stood there, behind a car, holding my breath, listening as my wife, the woman I thought I knew, responded. I don't know. I need to figure out how to break it to him. I don't think I can keep this up much longer. Her words were so casual, like she was talking about grocery shopping instead of whatever this was. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. My kids were still in the midst of trick-or-treating, oblivious to the bomb that had just gone off in my life. It felt like the world had stopped spinning, and everything around me was moving in slow motion. I needed to confront her, right then, right there, but I knew I had to stay calm. I couldn't make a scene in front of the kids, especially not at a Halloween event. I took a deep breath and turned away, walking briskly to my truck. My hands were shaking. What was I supposed to do now? My mind raced through a million possibilities, none of which felt good. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't let this moment pass without finding out the truth. The truth would set me free or tear me apart. Either way, I had to know. I drove away from the park with my hands gripping the wheel, the cold leather under my palms feeling like it was burning into me. The kids were still having the time of their lives, and Laura had no idea what was going through my mind. How could she? To her, everything was fine. We were at a community event, our kids dressed up and laughing, like we were still the perfect family we once seemed to be. But as I sat there, my mind kept playing over and over what I just overheard. It was like hearing a song on repeat that you didn't want to hear, but it was stuck in your head. I need to figure out how to break it to him, she had said, like I was some problem she had to deal with, a person she could just toss aside. The idea that she had been planning this for so long, probably months, had me sick to my stomach. All these little signs that I'd brushed off, the late nights at work, the texts she would guard with her life, her sudden obsession with needing space, had all been leading to this moment, a moment where I had to face the truth. I couldn't wait anymore. The kids were still chasing after each other in the park, enjoying the Halloween festivities, but my mind was somewhere else. I made a quick U-turn and pulled into a quiet corner of the parking lot. I needed to think, to breathe, but most of all, I needed answers. I wasn't about to let her play me for a fool any longer. There was no point in asking her directly yet. I knew she'd lie, maybe not even intentionally, but she would deny it until she was blue in the face. No, I needed to find out for myself. I needed to know what was really going on before I confronted her, before I went and ruined Halloween for the kids. As I sat in the truck, the full weight of it hit me. What was I going to do if this was really happening? I had known Laura for over a decade. We'd built a life together. Sure, things had become routine in the past few years. Too routine, really. But the thought that she could be seeing someone else behind my back felt like a punch to the gut. She wasn't the type of person to lie outright. At least, that's what I used to think. But here I was, realizing just how much I didn't know about her anymore. I thought of the jacket again, the one she'd been wearing earlier. She hadn't worn that before, and it hadn't been for the event. That, more than anything, struck me as the real clue. Who was she dressing up for? Who was she trying to impress? Eric's name echoed in my mind. Like a drumbeat I couldn't shake off. I decided I couldn't stay in the truck any longer, so I stepped out, walking briskly toward the event's entrance. The scene felt surreal. People were still chatting by their trunks, laughing, handing out candy, unaware of the war waging inside my head. It seemed so trivial, so petty, compared to what I was dealing with. But then, life had a way of throwing curveballs at you when you least expected them, didn't it? There I was, just a father, a husband, trying to make sure his kids had a good Halloween, while the world around me crumbled into pieces. I turned my head toward the parking lot where I knew Laura's car was parked. It looked like just another normal car in a line of minivans and sedans. But now, all I could think about was how it had carried her, and Eric, through this whole twisted affair. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Instead, I headed back to where Ben and Lucy were playing, trying to pull myself together. I smiled, pretending everything was fine, because I didn't want them to feel the shift in the atmosphere. Ben was running around, laughing, his face painted with the excitement of the night. Lucy, the little witch, was casting spells with her friends, waving her plastic broomstick in the air like she was a sorceress in some magical world. I almost let myself be swept up in the joy of it all, but the weight of what I'd overheard hung over me like a storm cloud. It wasn't just the affair that was eating at me. It was the realization that I didn't know my wife anymore. And it hurt. It hurt more than I could explain. The man I was that day, the guy standing there pretending everything was okay, wasn't the same person I had been just a few hours before. Laura eventually found me, and I could see it in her eyes. She could tell something was off. She asked if I was okay, and I nodded, forcing a smile. I wanted to ask her about Eric. I wanted to shout at her and demand the truth, but I held back. What good would it do to create a scene in front of the kids? I wasn't going to be that guy, not tonight. Not yet. I told her I wasn't feeling well and that I needed to take a break, which wasn't a lie. I was sick, but it wasn't the flu. It was the cold, suffocating feeling of betrayal, of being blindsided by someone I thought I knew. She kissed me on the cheek and said she'd be right back. As she walked off to talk to some other parents, I watched her disappear into the crowd. The sight of her made me feel like an outsider in my own life. I left the event early, telling the kids that we needed to go home because I was feeling under the weather. They were disappointed, but at least they didn't protest. On the drive back, I kept replaying the conversation I'd overheard. I needed to confront her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it just yet. I had to know for sure. So, I made a plan. Tomorrow, when the kids were at school, I would search the house. I had to find something, anything, that would confirm what I already feared. The next morning, I waited until Laura was out of the house for an appointment. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but I needed to find the truth. I rifled through drawers, checked her phone, even went through the laundry. And then, I found it. The evidence. It wasn't much, just a small detail, but it was enough. A receipt. For a hotel room. A hotel room that wasn't for a business trip, like she had claimed. It was for a weekend getaway. And, in the special request section of the receipt, there it was, romantic getaway. I couldn't breathe. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the hotel receipt in my hands. It felt like the room was spinning, and my mind was racing. My thoughts couldn't settle. They just kept bouncing off each other like pinballs in a machine. The words romantic getaway were burned into my brain. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, my pulse quickening, but I couldn't let myself explode just yet. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This wasn't a gut feeling. This was proof, clear, undeniable proof, that Laura had been hiding something from me. I had spent so many nights wondering what was going on, why she'd been so distant, why we couldn't seem to connect anymore. But to find out that she had been planning a weekend getaway with someone else, that hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know what to do with this new information. Part of me wanted to confront her right away, to call her out and demand answers. But the other part of me, the part that had spent years building this life with her, knew that I couldn't go charging in with accusations without knowing the full extent of what I was dealing with. So, I shoved the receipt back into the drawer where I'd found it, trying to push my feelings down. I had to stay composed. I couldn't let myself act on impulse. Not with the kids just a few rooms away, and not with the mess I was about to step into. When Laura got home, she acted like nothing was wrong. She smiled, asked about my day, and even offered to make dinner. It was like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just ripped apart the fabric of our relationship with a few simple words and a hotel receipt. I couldn't stand the act anymore. My mind was a million miles away, trapped in that moment when I discovered what she had been doing behind my back. I tried to force a smile, tried to pretend that everything was fine, but I could feel the walls closing in. It was suffocating. We had dinner as a family, the kids chattering about their candy haul, and I felt like a ghost sitting at the table. How could I continue to pretend? How could I keep this up when I knew the truth now? But as much as I wanted to confront her right there, to rip the veil off the lies she'd been weaving for months, I couldn't do it in front of the kids. I knew it would break them, and I wasn't ready to do that, not yet. After dinner, I suggested we take the kids to bed early. Laura agreed without hesitation, probably thinking I was just tired, but the truth was, I needed time. Time to process what I had just uncovered. Time to figure out what came next. I couldn't face her yet, not until I had all the pieces. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet in the house. I was alone with my thoughts, and they were a whirlwind. My whole life felt like it had just been turned upside down. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, everything I thought I understood about our marriage, was being torn apart at the seams. I had trusted her. I had believed in us. But now, all I could think about was Eric. The way he had been laughing with her at the event, the way she had looked at him. I couldn't stop picturing them together, and the more I did, the angrier I got. The next morning, as soon as the kids left for school, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to confront Laura. I couldn't keep living this lie. I needed to understand what was really going on, to hear her say the words out loud. I needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. So, I waited until she was in the kitchen, preparing her coffee, and then I walked in, my heart pounding in my chest. "Laura, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but laced with an intensity one hadn't felt in years. She turned around, surprised, but quickly masked it with a smile. "What's up, Jack? Is everything okay?" I didn't answer her question. Instead, I pulled the receipt from my pocket and dropped it on the kitchen table in front of her. Her face froze for a split second, and that was all it took. I saw it in her eyes, the guilt, the panic, the way her shoulders tensed up as she realized there was no way out of this. "Laura," I said softly, almost pleading. "What's this? You've been planning a romantic getaway? With him?" She swallowed hard, her eyes flicking nervously toward the table, then back to me. "Jack, I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." "Don't give me that." I shot back, my frustration spilling over. "You think I'm stupid? You think I wouldn't notice? You've been hiding this for months, Laura. You've been lying to me, to our family." "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It was just, I don't know. It started out as nothing, and then it became something." I felt like I was drowning in her words. How could she say that? How could she stand there and tell me that this was just some accident, some fluke? I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I held it together. "Who is he, Laura? Who are you really with? And why?" She didn't answer at first. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I once knew, the woman I loved. But that woman had betrayed me. She had betrayed everything we had built. "His name is Eric," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. He's been a friend for a long time, and I don't know. It just happened, Jack. I never planned it." I couldn't look at her anymore. The room felt suffocating. I didn't want to hear her explanations, her excuses. I didn't want to know how it had happened. I just wanted the truth, the raw, unfiltered truth. And there it was, right in front of me. "We're done," I said, my voice quiet, almost broken. "I don't know how we got here, but we're done." I turned and walked away, not looking back, not giving her the chance to plead or beg. This wasn't something I could fix. This wasn't something I could just sweep under the rug and move on from. It was over. As I stepped out of the house, the cold air hit me like a slap in the face. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do next, but I couldn't stay in that house. Not anymore. The days that followed were a blur of numbness and disbelief. My entire life had been turned upside down, and I couldn't escape the heaviness that hung over me. The kids were away at school, and Laura was gone, spending her time at her appointment, or wherever it was she needed to be to avoid confronting the truth. The house felt so empty, even though the kids still ran around, their laughter echoing in the hallways. But it was all an illusion now, a fading memory of the life we used to have. Every room, every corner, held reminders of the life we had built together, and now, it felt like I was living in someone else's story. I tried to carry on like everything was normal. I still took the kids to school, still did the grocery runs, still acted like the father and husband I used to be. But inside, I was crumbling. I couldn't stop thinking about Laura and Eric. I couldn't shake the image of her with him, laughing, whispering, sharing moments that were meant to be mine. I kept replaying that night, the night I found out, over and over in my head. I could still hear her voice, the guilt in it, the hesitation, as if she was trying to find the right words to break me. And then, there was the moment when she said it, almost too casually, like it didn't matter. It just happened, Jack. Just happened. That's how she justified everything. That's how she explained it away. It was almost worse than if she'd just told me she didn't love me anymore. At least then, I could have understood. The hardest part of it all was facing the kids. They didn't understand why their mother wasn't coming home, why things felt different. They didn't know what had happened, and I wasn't sure I could find the words to explain it to them. I kept things light, kept the distractions coming, movie nights, extra bedtime stories, anything to keep their minds off the shift in the house. But deep down, I knew I couldn't shield them from the truth forever. They were bound to find out eventually. And when they did, how would they handle it? Would they understand? Would they hate me for not protecting them from the pain? One evening, just after putting the kids to bed, I decided I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep living in this house full of half-truths and shattered illusions. I needed to make a decision. I couldn't wait for Laura to come back and try to talk me into staying, or for some miracle where we could pick up the pieces of our marriage. It wasn't going to happen. I had to take control of my own life again, even if it meant making the hardest decision I'd ever made. I grabbed my phone and texted Laura. I didn't want to do this face-to-face just yet. I wasn't sure I could look her in the eye without breaking down. We need to meet. It's over. I need to figure things out. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding as I hit send. It wasn't just a text, it was a final decision. There was no going back from this. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as soon as I sent it, followed by an overwhelming sadness. I hadn't wanted this. I hadn't planned for any of this to happen, but I couldn't let her destroy everything we had, everything I had believed in. She responded quickly. Can we meet tomorrow? I need to explain everything, Jack. Please. I didn't want to hear her explanations. What good would they do now? The truth was out, and no word she could say would change what had happened. But I agreed to meet. Not for her, but for me. I needed closure. I needed to hear it from her lips, to understand exactly what had been going on behind my back. The next morning, I drove to the coffee shop we had visited 1,000 times. It was a quiet place, the kind of spot where you could hide in plain sight. I sat down at a corner booth, my hands shaking as I gripped the coffee cup. I hadn't slept much the night before, my mind racing with thoughts of what Laura was going to say. Would she apologize? Would she try to explain away the affair like it was just some mistake? I didn't know, but I was determined to hear her out, even if it broke me. When Laura walked in, her eyes immediately found mine. She hesitated for a moment, her expression a mix of guilt and desperation, and then she came over to sit across from me. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't need to. My silence was all the answer she needed. She knew what I was thinking. She knew what I was feeling. I'm sorry, Jack, she began, her voice shaky. I never meant for any of this to happen. It was just... I don't know. It was like everything fell apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. I've been so confused, and I made a huge mistake. I should have come to you sooner, but I didn't. I didn't know how to. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mind was reeling. She was sitting there, talking to me like she hadn't just ripped apart everything I thought I knew about her, about us. She was asking for forgiveness, trying to make me feel like I should sympathize with her. But the truth was, I was beyond sympathy. I was just broken. I don't know what to say to that, I finally replied, my voice rough. You don't just fall into an affair, Laura. You make choices. You made choices, and you knew what you were doing. So don't sit here and tell me this was some accident. She flinched at my words, and for a moment, I saw the vulnerability in her eyes. But it didn't matter. That moment had passed. She had already made her choices, and I had to live with them. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I never wanted to hurt you. I shook my head, unable to look at her. Well, you did. You've hurt me more than you'll ever understand. And it's too late now. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending everything's okay. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the words between us hanging in the air. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. Ben's school calling to tell me he wasn't feeling well. I had to leave. I have to go, I said, standing up abruptly. Laura reached out for my hand, but I pulled away before she could grab it. It's over, I said, my voice steady, but the tears threatening to break free. Don't try to fix this. There's nothing to fix anymore. And with that, I walked out, leaving her there, alone, with the shattered remnants of the life we once had. I thought walking out of that coffee shop would give me some clarity, some sense of relief, but instead, it left me feeling more lost than ever. The cold air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside, trying to focus on the next steps I needed to take. My heart was heavy with the weight of it all, of everything that had led up to this moment. I had faced the truth, heard the apologies, but none of it seemed to matter. Laura's words had bounced off me like I wasn't even there, and I walked away feeling like a stranger in my own life. The kids would be home soon, and I had to face them with a smile, pretending that everything was fine when, inside, I felt like I was unraveling. The days after the meeting with Laura felt like a blur. It was like I was walking through a fog, going through the motions without really being present. I kept asking myself over and over what went wrong, trying to figure out where everything had fallen apart. Was it me? Had I missed the signs? Had I been so blinded by the routine of life that I didn't notice my wife slipping away, falling into someone else's arms? I spent sleepless nights thinking about it, about how easily everything had come crumbling down. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't change what had happened. Laura had made her choices, and now I had to make mine. I knew that things couldn't stay the way they were. I couldn't keep living in this house, haunted by the memories of what used to be. I needed to find a way out, a way to reclaim my life. But how could I? How do you pick up the pieces when you feel like you've been shattered? The answer, I realized, was simple. You just do it. You take it one step at a time, even when you don't know where you're going. I packed a bag and went to stay at a friend's house for a few days, needing space to think, to breathe without the constant reminder of what had happened. As I sat there, in the quiet of someone else's home, I began to realize something. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my marriage. I was grieving the loss of the person I used to be. The Jack who had believed in happy endings and the idea of a perfect family had been left behind in the wreckage. And maybe that's okay. Maybe I didn't need to be that person anymore. Maybe it was time for me to let go of the past and figure out who I was without Laura. I spent the next few days sorting through my emotions, trying to separate the pain from the anger. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to call Laura and yell at her, to demand she explain herself in ways she never could. But then I remembered what she had said, the way she had tried to justify everything. It just happened. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. The more I realized that there was nothing left to salvage. We were over. And as much as I hated to admit it, the thought of starting over, of creating a new life, was starting to feel less scary and more like a possibility. When I returned home a few days later, things were different. Laura wasn't there, and the house felt more like a shell than a home. The kids were with their grandmother for the weekend, giving me the space I needed to clear out the things that didn't belong. I didn't want to keep living in a place that reminded me of what I had lost. As I packed up some of the old family photos, the ones that had once been a symbol of our life together, I found myself standing still, staring at the pictures. It was hard to believe that the people in those pictures were the same ones who had now become strangers to me. I couldn't even recognize myself in those images. But I knew something important now. I had to move on. I couldn't stay here and dwell on the past. I had 2 kids who needed me, and I couldn't let them see me fall apart. The house, the pictures, the memories, they were just things. Things that couldn't bring back what I had lost. And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't about holding on to the past anymore. It was about moving forward. I had spent so much time trying to hold everything together, but now it was time to let go. Let go of the resentment, the anger, the pain. When Laura called a few days later, asking if we could meet again, I knew it was over. I knew she wanted to talk, to apologize, to try to patch things up, but I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. And maybe never. She had crossed a line that I couldn't erase, no matter how hard I tried. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to keep replaying the same conversation in my head. So, I did what I knew I had to do. I told her that we were done, that it was over. And when she asked if there was any chance of us getting back together, I told her no. I couldn't go back. Not after everything. The next few months were a blur of adjustments. The kids started splitting their time between my house and Laura's, and I found myself settling into a new routine. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I started focusing on myself again, finding small pieces of happiness where I could. I began working on things I had neglected for years, my friendships, my hobbies, my career. Slowly, things began to fall into place. The pain didn't go away, but I learned to live with it, to accept it as part of the process. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a call from Laura. She told me she was moving away, that she had decided to start fresh somewhere else. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Part of me was relieved. She was finally letting go too. But part of me felt a strange sense of finality, as if the last thread of our connection had been cut for good. I told her I wished her the best, and I meant it.